Oasis there and roll with it. Coming up to 11:15 here at the BBC. You are with BBC Radio Kent. Welcome along. It's Eliza with you in for Steve today, and we are talking all about driving. I've got a text in. Morning, Eliza. Morning, John. I stopped driving when I had health issues. We have generations that know no alternative and are not willing to change. Judging by driving standards, some should be tested at a lower age. Thank you, John. That's John from Folkestone there. So look, the conversation is today all about driving. I want to know about the day you realised it was time to stop driving, or perhaps the day that you had to tell mum or dad that they shouldn't be driving anymore. Or perhaps has someone in your family had to tell you you shouldn't be behind the wheel. How did that feel for you? Now, we're talking about this, of course, because Kent has just started a fitness to drive assessment. So this is an alternative to prosecution, right? If you are of a certain age, so over 70, or perhaps you have a medical condition that has been a factor in an accident or perhaps careless driving. So Rachel Odell is on the board of Driving Mobility. She's been involved in a similar scheme in Hampshire and Dorset, which has been running for a few years. So she's going to have a flavour of how this is actually working. Rachel, lovely to have you with us. Thank you for joining. We're starting this week. We're diving into it. You've been doing this for a number of years. How's it been going? What's the response been like?
Hello, Eliza. Yes, as I say, it's been running in Hampshire for about 9 years now. We set up the scheme in 2013 with our local constabulary. We also do the same scheme in Dorset. That's a slightly newer development for us, but that's been going for about 3 years. It does actually receive from the people that participate, especially obviously those that we say are safe drivers, and that is about 50%. So it's a good sort of majority really of people that do come that are safe. They actually find it a very positive experience because they feel, there has been an incident on the road for which they have been, deemed to be at fault. Something's happened. Anybody can have an accident. And they do feel coming along for the driving assessment has actually raised their awareness of their own driving, any faults that might have crept in, that type of thing. So the feedback is very positive from those people.
So from the 50% that pass, but what about the 50% that fail?
That's it. Well, even those 50% don't necessarily go away and it's the end of their licence. Some of those are actually recommended to go and brush up with lessons so that they go away. They're not safe at the moment, what we're seeing on the road. That they are, they've got into some bad habits which could be dangerous to other road users. So we send them off for some tuition and they come back and then they get reassessed. And then the pass rate overall is about 70%. So we're talking sort of 30% of people that unfortunately it is the end of the road for their driving career. So, naturally it can come as a shock to some people. We're dealing with relatives, as you mentioned as well. And, in a lot of cases, those relatives are actually quite supportive of our decision. They've lived with mum or dad or a husband or wife, and they can actually see the deterioration in their driving. It's not always a shock to the relatives, and quite often it is a little bit of a relief to them.
Well, I am sort of like having a think about it and sort of putting myself in that position, and I can imagine that actually, rather than me having to sit down with mum and dad, and you know what it's like, parents never want to take advice from their kids, do they? It's just it goes both ways. So potentially I imagine that some families are finding this a much easier way of sorting out a fairly big problem.
That's exactly it. As you say, mum or dad don't necessarily want to listen, or the children don't necessarily want to be the bad guy and tell them to stop. So it is actually much better received from us as professionals. There is a proper assessment of the driving. There's a full process to follow, and the person who has to stop driving is much more likely to accept it from us. So it's a better result in a way. As I say, sometimes it's upsetting for them.
Of course.
We're also here in a capacity, there's a new initiative which has been funded by the Department for Transport for all the English driving mobility centres to have a position in post, and this is actually my role within Wessex DriveAbility now. It's a mobility hub in order to give advice on people once they have to stop driving. How are they going to manage their everyday life? Where do they want to go? How can we help them get there without the car? So there's actually quite a lot of help in the community.
So let's talk about what's in place then in Hampshire. So I come to your centre, I've just had my licence taken away, I'm at the Mobility Hub with probably a bunch of other people. What are you going to say to me about how I can continue living a big full life? What actions can I take?
Absolutely. Well, each person is different because they live in different areas of Hampshire, and a lot of the community transport obviously is provided by their local council. So there's no one size fits all. People live in rural areas or urban areas. So we tailor our advice individually to each person. So everyone has their own initial consultation. So we can do a telephone consultation, or they can have face-to-face if they want to drop into the centre and actually speak to me in person. Then that's fine. We'll tailor.
But Rachel, sorry to interrupt, but afterwards, the whole idea is that we are then reliant on public transport or the goodwill of family and friends. Is that right?
No, not at all. As I say, there's a lot of community transport situations or solutions out there as well. Door-to-door transport, such as dial a ride, call and go, community car schemes, that type of thing. For people who can't access public transport, whether the bus stop is too far to walk or if they have dementia and would get lost, if there's any concern about them actually catching the bus, or they are physically unable, or perhaps they don't even have a bus route in their area, there's an awful lot of community transport solutions operated generally by their local council, and they're very low cost, much cheaper than taxis. And obviously, carry on.
Did you find that once you brought this scheme in, that actually you had to address the situation of transport? Because I know here in Kent, we have an issue in our rural areas where there is not enough transport. And so if somebody's licence is revoked, if it's taken away, actually they will not have access to very much public transportation. So did you see a rise in the number of dial-a-ride operators at that point?
Sadly, no, because, as I say, council funding is obviously quite tight at the moment. Public funding is not great, and the councils have to decide where they're going to spend their money, whether it's, the local library, leisure facilities, or these type of systems. So it is a little bit of a postcode lottery, I won't lie to you. Some councils have incredibly good schemes, very well funded, and it's very low cost to people, and other councils really haven't put their money into those schemes. So it is very much where that person lives, and until public funding increases for them to provide that, then it might be difficult to provide a solution for everybody.
Rachel, I love the idea that you're there in the hub, really sort of helping people get through this sort of very challenging weeks, months, perhaps even years. So this is a wonderful thing that you're doing. You've been operating for 9 months, or this whole 9 years rather. Sorry, it's 9 years. So you've got lots of experience. What were the sort of challenges if you were? I mean, have you had conversation with the Kent scheme first of all?
Yes, I say all of the centres do talk to each other, and obviously Kent came to us initially for advice about how to get going on the scheme. So we do talk to each other regularly about how it's going for us and the best way forward for them. Obviously theirs is very new, but we hope them with success.
What were the biggest challenges for you guys? What did you have to? What did you sort of think this is going to work really well, and then suddenly go, do you know what, we need to adapt this particular thing?
Well, generally speaking, I mean, our main business, all of our driving mobility centres, is running the Fitness to Drive scheme anyway. So it's not all necessarily police referrals that we receive. It might be GP referrals, or, people coming off their own back, or the DVLA. So we have been doing this for many more years just than the 9. Yeah. What we really found was adapting this scheme to be fit for purpose for the type of people that we see through the police scheme, because ordinarily the type of people who come for Fitness to Drive assessments have a undiagnosed medical condition or a physical disability. Whereas with the police scheme, as I say, anyone can have an accident, so we don't know what the underlying cause of these clients are. So if they come and they say, there's no problem with me, doctor's never diagnosed any medical condition, we really have to unpick that. That's where we have occupational therapists present in all parts of our assessment, because they are the clinical input into that assessment that's really looking at someone and saying, no, look, there's something going on cognitively with this person. We think there's maybe some undiagnosed dementia. The occupational therapist can't make a diagnosis there and then, but they can certainly pick up on tells. They're very experienced at working with people with medical conditions. And they have to be detectives, really, when they go out on the road. They have to say, is there something underlying? We've got no diagnosis. Is there something cognitively that's affecting this person's driving? Or is it simple that they've got into bad habits? And, that's the real difference, that it's quite difficult.
So that's the important thing, is to have the occupational therapist. Those are the people that are making the difference in making this operation run smoothly. We keep hearing about all sorts of different public sector workers and the fact that we don't have enough of them. Is it hard to get enough people to be able to service this particular hub?
It's certainly a challenge, because, very certain type of people do fit this role. But, we're fully staffed. We've got a very experienced team. And generally, when we do advertise a post, we get someone along. And they're self-employed by us in our centres. So they're not NHS employees, for example. Yeah, we do employ these people directly in our centres. But there's a lot of training involved, as you would imagine. They don't just hit the ground running and make decisions on people's future driving licence status. You get it wrong in either direction. You either devastate somebody's life potentially needlessly, or you're releasing someone out onto the road saying they're safe and then they go and have an accident. So there is a lot of training and input that goes into getting these people up to speed. So our assessors, really are sort of top notch. So look, let's put me in the position. I've had an accident. I get a letter in the post to say, look, either you're going to be prosecuted or you're gonna you have this choice of having a fitness to drive assessment. How long is that process? How long do I have to wait for that particular meeting? Well, we have certain timescales that we must fulfil on the police scheme, because basically they have 6 months in order to prosecute someone from the time of their, the alleged offence. So they will refer people to us as quickly as possible. It does rely to a certain degree. The person, having the assessment needs to turn around the paperwork. The police will make the offer to them, and they've got 28 days to respond. So that, could be a month down the line just waiting for the application form to come in. But then we do work very quickly, because we know the police are on a timescale, and if the person who had the incident doesn't come to us for the fitness to drive assessment, then they still need to be able to be prosecutable. So we will always ensure that we see someone within 5 months of the incident happening, so that the police still have time, if necessary, to forego our process if the person then decides to go to court.
I've got like 10 seconds, 15 seconds left. If that happens, can you drive within those 5 months?
Oh, certainly, absolutely. Yeah. Until you're assessed as unsafe, it's driving as normal. And we would actually recommend that in a lot of cases, so that people don't lose their driving skills.
If you have to tell somebody, look, it's time to stop driving, what's your advice? What should we say? Just stop driving? You're rubbish?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we no, of course not. We do break the news sensitively. Our staff are trained in breaking bad news. They will approach it very sensitively. We try and involve somebody else in, giving that news. So whether it's a son or a daughter, so that there is the family support. But then obviously we can then carry on.
If I have to tell mum or dad tomorrow, what should I say to them?
Approach it sympathetically. That's the important thing.
Nice.
It is a case of, look, yeah, absolutely, that's the key thing. Definitely don't say they're rubbish. It's a sort of case of talking to them very, very sensitively, saying, look, we think maybe there's more bumps and scrapes on your car than there used to be. You're having, trouble reversing into parking spaces, or, staying on the right side of the road. Perhaps we could look into this. I mean, I would recommend anyone to refer to us for a driving assessment in the first instance, because then you don't have to be the bad guys, and it's a subjective decision.
That is a plan. Rachel, thank you so much. Lovely to have you with us. That's Rachel Odell there, who is on the board of Driving Mobility in Hampshire and Dorset, where they have a similar scheme.